jump into the theme, which is shared dreams, metaverse, and the imagination. And Philip and Adam, just since there's so many definitions floating out there, how would you both very briefly, elevator pitch style, describe what a metaverse is?
Do you want me to take this one first?
Sure.
All right. Well, this is actually very topical because I was watching something earlier today from a headset manufacturer talking about sort of the metaverse being a 3D projection of the real world into a virtual space. But I think it's missing the point. To me, a metaverse is a canvas, and it's a word I use a lot when I'm describing these topics. But a metaverse is a blank canvas. It's got to be networked. That means to say that there's got to be other people in it, and you've got to be able to see the stuff going on simultaneously. It's got to be powerful and creative. You need to be able to build whatever your imagination can host. And it has to be accessible as well. I don't think that's an has to, but I think it's an important aspect that when we talk about the metaverse as opposed to a metaverse, the metaverse has everyone in it. It doesn't matter where you are, what hardware you are, what your setup is like. It's all like the web. It's ubiquitous, and I think that's the end goal definition for me. Beyond that, it can be anything you like.
How about you, Philip?
You know, of course, I've been using that word for a long time, and I'm probably responsible for using it in ways that I would now be less confident in talking about. In short, I think that the older I get and the wiser I get, the more I contemplate virtual worlds in my work and in the work of others over a lot of time now, the less I am sure what everybody means by metaverse. It's wonderful. You know, I think there's a wonderful process there where we sort of tear down the, icons that we hold. And I think metaverse is one of those. We all seem to like using the word, or many of us do. And I don't think we have a solid idea what it means. In my own thinking, I would say that the metaverse is, or one way of putting it maybe, or a more recent way of thinking about it that I've been seeing it as lately is the metaverse could be thought of as the digital space between us. There's a wonderful book on architecture, I think, by the same name, The Space Between Us. And I think that what we're really trying to get to with the metaverse is, as Adam says, a largely creative space that consists of our shared agreement on the space in between us. Just before we started here, we were talking about, spaces of many miles wide or whatever, solely created by one creator. But there the question becomes, what if I don't want to see that space? Or what if I want mine to be adjacent in some other way? But I think the broadest idea of the metaverse is that we can, using technology, as you said, using network technology, we can probably all come to some consensus as to what the space between us looks like. And I think that space is the metaverse. And I think the thing that's challenging about it is that, and I am guilty of this as well, one can perhaps argue that there is a set of small incremental steps that can be taken from an existing digital space, such as, say, Fortnite, or even this one, and that by taking a series of small incremental steps, we end up at a metaverse. That, I would say, and especially as time has gone by, I am less sure of. I don't know that there's a stepwise set of moves that takes us from a Second Life or a Fortnite or a Breakroom to the metaverse as we're talking about it. And in that regard, I would agree with Adam's definition. It is a canvas that is accessible to all of us and that, is an expressive creative space. And as I said, I think a space between us. So that's my definition.
I think that's a good one, and I think that there's some compounding factors there. I mean, whether the metaverse appears fully formed or not, I think is an interesting question, because the web itself did actually have steps along the way to the development of the first hypertext web browser. I mean, you think about Gopher, you even think about some even older ones. What was it? It was like Metatext or something like that was the very first one. I can't remember the name, but there was incremental steps that did have the same sort of concepts of hyperlinks and a document tree that could be navigated and accessed over a network. I mean, those steps existed, but it really wasn't. I mean, the web, which is really the analogous term to the metaverse, the web did appear by steps. There was those steps along the way, but when it finally got to that last step, that's when we saw the massive user adoption. But from a technical level, there was steps along that path, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think comparing the dream of the metaverse to the internet or to the web is also certainly a delightful fireside discussion.
Yeah.
The internet is different though, because it doesn't contain people. The first vision that we all had of the internet was as an information pool, and which it very much is and was. And then we thought of all these different ways to connect it together, to hyperlink it, to have sites, to have, groups, and to have rings, and all these different ways that we thought of to connect it together. But the it that we were connecting together was a bibliographic work.
Yeah.
And the nature of this and the nature of virtual worlds has, at least in most of them, come to include the idea of the person, of the individual who is there, and as we all are now. And I think that throwing that cog of people into the mix is what has led us down a lot of blind alleys, and what is still going to be the subject of a good deal of work. What is a technology-mediated world like when it contains us?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, that is a point on the definition of a metaverse, is that I think that the avatar is central to it. I know people have experimented with avatar-free metaverse-like software, but I think that the personal representation is just so important. It's the most important part of a virtual world. I mean, you can have the prettiest looking landscapes, you can have the prettiest objects and furniture and interfaces and all the rest of it. But if you don't have the pretty avatar, I think that's the ability to be expressive in your avatar. I mean, today I'm a hyperactive little bunny rabbit, and I actually have grown very attached to this avatar. And I think that's just also another really critical part of it, is that the avatar is a central component of the metaverse. It's just as important as the space itself.
Mm-hmm. Maybe even more so. Just think about how important, even from a business perspective, Avatar is for Fortnite and ROBLOX, kind of the leaders on that. But actually, I wanted to go kind of draw from your experience from 20 plus years working on Metaverse platforms, and with the theme creativity. What's been the most surprising or humbling thing you've learned about user creativity working in virtual worlds and Metaverse platforms? For both of you.
Philip, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Well, as you know, James, I expected to be surprised. So, the whole point of Second Life was to create this creative canvas and then see what people built with some minimal set of rules about what they could and couldn't do, an economy to enable things, etc. These are all essentially, collectively agreed or imposed, kind of rules, and then you see what people build within that. I always found everything that was done to be just amazing. I mean, it was amazing to see what you suspected would happen, which was that that everybody would build on each other's works. And so you would see a gradual refinement, which relied on building blocks that had come before,
Mm-hmm.
So people were able to build. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's most delightful about Second Life as compared to, say, Minecraft, by example, is that while Minecraft is a spectacular canvas and in my opinion contains within itself the seed of what we will someday see in much greater form, which is living landscapes, automata, life, rules that regulate it. That's what Minecraft, I think, offers. But Minecraft doesn't offer the same thing that you saw with Second Life, which is this infinite progression of creativity on top of creativity on top of creativity to create new structures. And so I think that's, if you say humbling, I don't know if that's the right word, but I think the idea that we are now generationally, you can find things in Second Life that are so staggeringly removed in their fascination and quality from the earliest days that it just boggles the mind, given that the rules themselves and the prims and the, largely the building blocks haven't changed. So I think that's pretty inspiring.
Yeah,
that's great. How about you, Adam?
I have to take specific examples because I mean I can list off all those fantastic elements. I mean, in virtual worlds for years and years and years. But there have been things that have just woken up and amazed me. One of them is the first-person shooter system that we're actually in the audience. Uli wrote that one, and someone from our team just had said, Adam, you've got to come and check this out. And someone had scripted up a whole sort of detailed game system inside the platform using the tools in a way that I just never thought was even remotely possible to do. I thought that the scripting language and the runtime and the APIs were just too limited, and then someone comes along and does it anyway. it's just amazing, and I think that's the beauty and the fantastic element of virtual worlds is, one, how people subvert the rules of the platform and break them in all sorts of different ways that are just wonderful. And it's not the kind of internet I broke the website kind of way that you ought to sort of see someone defaces the website. When someone defaces a virtual world, 90% of the time they're doing something amazingly creative with it. It's not the same sort of negative impacts that you see on the web. And that's the part about virtual worlds I think that just amazes me the most and gives me the most inspiration.
That's great. And just jump off that, then Philip mentioned Second Life, and actually, so we're celebrating Second Life's 18th year in existence as a commercial product, and wanted to ask what aspects of Second Life user creativity should newer platforms learn from that aren't doing? And maybe have Philip jump onto this, of course.
Well, I'm pretty proud of Second Life. I think that it still contains a number of capabilities, structures and features that have not yet been replicated by others, which is pretty inspiring. I think the economy and the ability to set derivative works, a la, aka the NFT, the very idea that you can allow somebody to take something that you've created and move it somewhere else and use it somewhere else, right, creates this nested doll of derivative rights that Second Life really pioneered. That, combined with an economy, has continued to make it vital and growing, and or growing in its content, certainly over all these years. So I'd say that ability to have an economy and really completely empower the creation of content, against the backdrop of that economy, and then its reuse, is still something that hasn't really been replicated, and is largely still an opportunity that lies in the future, for us all because of that.
Yeah, the economy side, it's actually it's a whole topic of its own, and it's fascinating how Second Life has worked. I know that Lyndon's had to do a lot of financial and legal innovation to be able to support the economy of Second Life, and I really hope that regulators begin to make that a bit more accessible for everyone, because it's not an easy process, but it's absolutely the engine that powers Second Life's success is the ability for people to actually live and breathe creating virtual goods for themselves. I think that's a fascinating and fantastic side effect, because I think that ultimately, if we chart the course of human civilization, we are moving from an economy that's based on subsistence to an economy that's based on self-actualization, and in that self-actualization economy, it's all about the creative output of people. And Second Life, I think, is one of the most successful examples of that anywhere in the world. It's brilliant and fascinating, and I really want to see how that progresses as time goes on.
Well, that takes me to the next question. Talking about imagination, a lot of the bigger metaverses we see now, they don't have the economic backbone that Second Life has, but the creative community is larger. And I'm wondering, something I've been thinking about a lot, do you think imagination and creativity in the metaverse is better spurred by a community-minded spirit that's not thinking about money? Or do you think the profit motive of selling in-world content is essential to the imagination?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is, there's a degree of privilege inherent in the presumption that we can just entertain each other now, right? So I think that if you pull the camera back and look at society, we've got this terrible problem in the world right now where technology has created greater means. Technology has created a clear path, for example, toward what you just said, James, the ability to participate in a creative economy to a large extent, rather than having to worry about, getting by in the real world. But the distribution of that technology generated wealth has worsened. It's become more, a smaller and smaller group of wealthier and wealthier people that have it. So I think there's kind of a high level societal question around, can we use, and of course, I guess there's a question, can virtual worlds be a part of the solution? But can we get to a place where everybody, with a capital E, has the ability to pursue with some of their leisure time, entertaining each other in a virtual world? I think there's a big question mark and an existential one around whether we can ever get there. But assuming in the long term that we do, and I think that is a reasonable, at least it's an optimist's position, but it's defensible. If we get to that, then yeah, we could probably forego money altogether, right? But for the time, as we know, one of the happiest stories of Second Life is that it has created real life income for at least a subset of people who cared to have it. And I think that matters a lot. So I don't know. So I guess I'd say I think I would have had a pat answer on one side or the other there. Creativity is better without money, or money is better without creativity, or something. I don't think it's that clear anymore. I think I also like recognition and value, right? Do you do art to be famous? Oh well, a great artist would tell you even that is, of course, a diminishment of the craft, right? Like I don't do it to be famous. I just do it because the spirit calls me to make art. But I think whether you're talking about fame or money, you got to leave people to their own reasons. I think the most important thing you have to do, though, is make that canvas. Look at TikTok, right? TikTok is the most beautiful new canvas that's been built, and you have to have tremendous respect for it. I mean, it's mind-boggling what a creative canvas it opened up, and it doesn't have money as yet.
Yeah, well, a lot of sponsorships on them.
Yeah, a lot of fame, a lot of fame, but not money.
Happens off the side.
Yeah.
I think my answer is that at least at the moment, and probably for a long time, there'll be some degree of mercantile interaction in these virtual worlds, and you can succeed in building a virtual world without an economy. I mean, VR chat's the poster child for that at the moment. There's sort of very limited options to remunerate a creator you like inside that platform. There's some, but it's all outside of the platform itself for the most part. So it can be done, but I think that when you want to get people who really, really, really know what they're doing and can afford all the time in the world to study their tools and to know how to bring the best out of them, you've got to be a professional at it. And by professional, I don't mean that you've got the skill level. I mean a professional as in you've got to be able to do this and give the amount of time you need in order to learn those tools. I mean, you look at a professional artist working on games these days, I mean, they've got 10, 15 years of sitting at a desk in front of Maya, learning the ins and outs of Maya to make something that matches up to the current quality standards. And being able to let those people run free in a virtual world means they produce the very, very prettiest content. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I mean, Minecraft's the opposite. Minecraft, everyone's got the same tools, and broadly speaking, those tools are so easy to learn that you can get up to speed in an instant, and people sort of get differentiated based on their creative imagination. But ultimately speaking, I think the people who do the best are the people who spend the most time in it, and for the moment, the best way to incentivize that is to actually let them make an income. And if they can live and breathe doing virtual worlds, then they're going to produce absolutely amazing things that will just draw crowds.
That's great. And quick note: if anyone has questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. You just have to click that icon up there, the question mark icon, and just put in the
below
question.
The screen off button.
Yeah, and we'll get to that soon. But yeah, talking about monetization and so on. Also been thinking about how I'd say Roblox and Fortnite and to a certain extent Minecraft they're basically metaverses, and what's consistent across all of them is the vast majority of users are either in their young teens up to early 20s. And Second Life is an outlier in the sense that the demographics actually go up quite much higher, like into the 50s, even 60s, 70s, 80s. But I've been wondering, do you both think that the metaverse kind of in practical terms and mass market terms is going to be limited to very young people primarily who have a lot of time to be creative on the 3D space, or will that change? Throw this to Philip first.
Well, if you're trying to build something new and nobody in the room's under 40 or something, I mean, I think you can be certain you're going to fail. There's just no question about that. So I would say one thing I'm guilty of, to the extent that I have an interest in what happens next with virtual worlds, is just simply that I'm too old to, be able to,
I hope not.
with certainly, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to consider that. So I think, to your question, I mean, the youngest generation, by having the most time, is always defining the future for sure. So I would say, James, that it is 100% the case that what the people, I'm not going to say kids, but it's like younger people that have more time and energy, and therefore, time multiplied by an energetic factor and adds up to a lot more creative time to contribute. They are, just by sheer mass, then going to determine whatever happens next. I think the fact that Second Life at the start was younger as well, and then aged as it went along.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's always true. I don't even think Second Life is that much of an exception to that, because I can't tell you in my own travels how many people I've met who told me they got their start, were in Second Life when they were kids, were in Second Life in college. You know what I mean? Like I hear that constantly. So I think that I think the wonderful thing about Second Life actually was that it didn't alienate anybody. And so everybody stuck around. I mean, not everybody, of course, but there was something for everybody there, where by comparison, like Minecraft, I don't think there's a lot of 40-something grown-ups that are like, when I get an extra few minutes, what I'd really like to do is play Minecraft. And that's because Minecraft as a sensory experience doesn't have universal appeal. But I think Second Life, by comparison, and highly, and capable, detailed worlds like Science Space and Breakroom as well, potentially have something for everybody.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I'm going to say that we've seen some very, very interesting experiences running Breakroom over the last year. So as many of you know, we sort of had to pivot off sideways to work on Breakroom for various reasons over the last year. And one of the curious things about the adoption of Breakroom is that we've seen huge adoption in places that you would never expect to happen. One of them is banking. We had a conference in here not too long ago where there was sort of the heads of various world banks and big high-profile names all coming in a virtual world and enjoying themselves and literally spending hours each day participating in these conferences and events. And it's an audience I would have picked. If I'd thought about the businesses that would be adopting Breakroom, it's a completely left field thing that I would never ever guessed. But at the same time, I think that the general purpose metaverse, there is a degree that the youth, as we will call them, have
Youths.
the youths, there we go, have a dominance over the creative side. And I think a combination of that is both the time and energy, like Philip said. I mean, when I was younger, I was in active worlds. When I was about 12 and 13, I think was when I got my start there. And I had tons of energy. I had tons of energy to build all sorts of fantastic creative things. The problem was that most of them weren't any good, but I had a lot of fun doing that. And I think that that energy is definitely worth harnessing. But ultimately, I think that the true metaverse, if we're gonna label one as existing or will exist, it definitely will have aspects that appeal to everyone, because I think that there is something for everyone in these worlds. It's just a different thing for different people. Some people want the socialization, some people want creativity, some people want entertainment, and it's a matter of working out how you can serve each of those desires simultaneously in one platform.
Yeah. And I'd say actually that's one of the most amazing things with Second Life is you'll have friend networks form where it'll be people in their 20s who suddenly become really good friends with people in their 60s and 70s. That does not happen in Facebook, for example, unless you're specifically related to them somehow. So that's been really great to see, and I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah.
I should jump to talking about VR. I know both of you have a lot of thoughts, and would love to know how important you think it is, the adoption of VR headsets to inspiring more imagination in the metaverse.
This is probably a point that me and Philip, I don't know whether we agree now or not on this one. I started out being the bugbear on VR many years ago. I was like, this is just not good enough for a consumer audience right now. And it's still kind of at that point today, I think. It's fascinating. VR is both a brilliant thing and a terrible thing. it's a brilliant platform for being really immersed, but the problem is that the illusion that VR gives you is just so easily broken. It takes no effort at all. The first time I got Sciencebase up and running in VR, we had a really old welcome center that had the handrails everywhere, and I teleported myself over to the one, and I reached out and I touched, my hand fell through. And I've said this, I used this analogy before, but the reality was the moment I did that, the spell was broken. It had gone from being, wow, I am really here, to, oh, that's disappointing, isn't it? And immediately realizing why I can't touch and grab this stuff. So I think that there's fantastic elements to VR. There's fantastic ability of presence and feeling there. And when you've got avatars in VR and you can look and feel to someone next to you and you can see their hands moving, you've got all the articulated movement, you do feel a great deal of presence with that person who's sitting next to you. But right now, I think that it's not the key driver for a virtual world. I mean, a virtual world is not going to be built off the back of VR-only audiences. And this was something else I said earlier, is that we've got to be accessible to everyone. It's got to be something that you can access using whatever hardware you have, because even 10 years from now, we are not going to have 95% penetration on VR headsets. It's just not realistic to think so. We might be in the 30% range at that point. Who knows how the next couple of years will play out. So I think that it's important in that it builds that immersiveness, but it's not important because it's not the thing that's going to make or break a metaverse / virtual world / whatever else you want to call it.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts, Philip?
Obviously, I've thought a ton about this since High Fidelity was founded on the promise of the VR headset as a new medium that you could use to get into virtual worlds. What we've learned in the years since then is that it's too early. The VR headset is not comfortable or capable enough to be used as a replacement for, say, the smartphone. And that's the thing that is ultimately going to happen. But I think that it's a long ways away. The inability to type and comfortably do computing operations that you normally expect to be able to do when using either a smartphone or a desktop is one deal killer for VR. Yeah. It simply doesn't superset the existing computer devices in the way that even the smartphone did. Like, even though the smartphone was slower to type on, it still rapidly became a superset device. You could carry it anywhere. You could do all the things you normally did on the internet using your smartphone, and you could also do some new things like text message or communicate and broadly communicate while you were doing those things, and carry it around in your pocket. The dream of the VR or the AR device is that it is the same thing. It'll allow you to do all the stuff you want to do on your smartphone, and also be immersed in a virtual world or see people as avatars. And we're absolutely not there yet. Some finer grained problems related to communication. So the VR headset has the problem that you can't type at a normal speed on it. That's my number one. As simple as that seems, if you really sit and think about it, right? It's just a complete shot to the head for the HMD, is that you can't type in it. A second factor is that it's divisive with respect to the people willing to use it. In short, across a diverse set of people, not everyone is equally interested in putting on a electronic blindfold while standing in a room with other people. The taller and the taller and the maler you are, the more likely you are to be willing to put on a head-mounted display. And that difference, though it's not a profound difference, is again a deal killer, because it creates a imbalanced set of people that are in VR when wearing HMDs, and that is intensely undesirable as well if you're trying to create something that is a social fabric for people. But I'm still enthusiastic, as I have been since I was a kid. For those who don't know, I've been working on VR and HMD related hardware technology since I was in high school. I've been tinkering with this stuff since the 80s. So I remain, optimistic about our ability to make improvements to these devices. But pragmatically, as an entrepreneur right now, nobody could build a startup based on the VR headset. Unless you're focusing on games for this very narrow audience of people that are wearing the devices today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say what's been interesting is I think the largest use case for VR headsets right now is the metaverse, because Breakroom, they claim about 3 million users, and a third of them are in VR headsets, and VR chat. probably about 1 million right now, and they claim also about a third use VR. So that seems to be the thing that's really, overall these, like Skyrim or whatever AAA VR experiences, what people really want is to be in a social space in VR.
Right.
Just,
Right.
you can see more of that. I should jump from VR to cryptocurrency and NFTs. Some people might go, "Oh my god!" But I mean, people are talking about it. I'm sorry, we got no choice. We got to discuss this. Both of you, do you think cryptocurrency and NFTs will help fuel imagination in current and future metaverses, or will it hurt it?
No.
Well,
yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, what I would say is there's little question but that Second Life, and it's in the fact that it had digitally transferable objects inside it, hence, otherwise, AKA NFTs, it was definitely a creative force. You could be creative, and you could own things, and you could sell things in a way that was uniquely enabled at the time by Second Life. I think that's still going to be the case today. Perhaps, as Adam is saying, there are, however, many challenges to face. One is that cryptocurrencies broadly, and for those who follow my writing, I'm rather obsessed with this. You can look at my Substack writings on this. Cryptocurrencies, unfortunately, have the property that they concentrate wealth rather than distributing it. Many of the sort of metaverse and internet ideas have beneath them the dream of a level playing field, right? We dream that by going into a new medium, we are all on a fair footing. And that dream is, of course, a very appropriate one to have and to continue to work toward. But cryptocurrencies in particular, in their nature, by their design, unfortunately have the property that they tend to concentrate wealth even more rapidly than dollars do. So they're exactly the opposite in that regard of what you wanted. So if you got into Bitcoin because you thought, screw the establishment, everybody's going to get the same amount of money and we're all going to start out on equal footing, nothing could be farther from the truth. What has in fact happened with cryptocurrencies is that they've made an extraordinarily small number of people even richer. And that's what's happening across all the different coins that are out there. But the reasons for this are mechanistic, at least to a certain extent. That is, new types of cryptocurrencies can be built in the future that will actually result in a fairer economic system. But those things are only prototypes at this point, and they're not yet out there. So the existing cryptocurrency structures, I'd agree with Adam, they're not creating new opportunities for wealth, nor are the NFTs, because the onboarding, much like Second Life, right, as people have complained about Second Life being too hard to get into. Well, if you think Second Life is too hard to get into, let me suggest that you get right out there and buy your first NFT and show it to a friend. I think you are 12 to 20 hours away from that. And that's a similar problem that I remember with Second Life.
Yeah. So here you go. You get my rants now.
Unleash.
The answer is no. I think that there is some interesting aspects to blockchain technology, and that you get the ability to operate an environment in a zero trust environment. That is to say that by distrusting everyone equally, you can create a modicum of trust. The problem with these infrastructures is that because there is a zero trust environment, because you've got no authority, so to speak, in the platform, and everyone sees that as a benefit of cryptocurrencies, but it actually is not. Let me give you a classic example. You've lost your password. You want to recover access to your account. Well done, you've lost your account. I mean, that's effectively the experience you're going to experience with NFTs in virtual worlds. If you lose access to your wallet, you have lost everything. There is no support number you can call. There is no one you can ring up and say, hey, help, and you've lost out. If someone logs into your account, steals your password, or another really common environment, someone sort of just throws your account through a password generation list and then finds a weak password, and they transfer the goods out of your account, you've lost them. They're gone. There's no way you can get that back. These kinds of things are just completely the antithesis of anything that's going to be remotely consumer friendly. There is just no way to build something on a cryptocurrency / NFT / blockchain environment and have it be a stable, usable, consumer-friendly product. There is just, or a consumer-friendly platform. There's just no way to do it. There is just so much of the Wild West environment, and it can break at a moment's notice. Not to least talk about the larger aspects we've got with things like the current environmental destruction and so on and so forth that Bitcoin is encouraging. I know those problems are at a technical level somewhat solvable, but I think there's much larger problems with zero trust environments. At the end of the day, you kind of do want someone responsible. I mean, we all live in a society that has a government. We don't live in South Sudan where there's none. I mean, we do that because we appreciate the benefits of what government can provide. It's not just a purely negative experience, although many of us have that experience with authorities. It's a matter of getting the authorities right. It's a matter of building these things in a way that we can trust, and we want to delegate the authority to an organization who will act responsibly. But cryptocurrencies, blockchain, NFTs, etc., is just the complete antithesis of that. So my answer is no.
Okay.
An add-on to that,
Please.
James, is that if you imagine building a new world, you can imagine building it from the bottom, layer by layer. I think that the anonymous systems that have been demonstrated with cryptocurrencies and some of the other sort of anonymous systems with, say an identity system that allows you to preserve information about yourself and only disclose what you think other people need, when you're interacting with them. Those types of ideas at the bottom, the lowest layer, are correct. We do need to build a world that is based on principles that look a little bit like some of these crypto systems. But as Adam said, we don't all want to live in a world of that total lowest level of anarchy. None of us, not all the time. We might occasionally or very occasionally, but for the most part, as Adam said, we want to come to some collective agreement about what higher level rules are that we can't violate, such as be a good person in a community, or don't mistreat people in economic dealings, or things like that. We can build those things as layers on top of these lower level systems, but those layers haven't been built yet. And so we have the weird situation where the few crazy people that at least claim they want to live in this world of anarchy where people can, hire out hits on them, using Bitcoin or whatever, those people are the loudest voices. That's what we're hearing. But what's actually going to happen is, in my opinion, is those systems are going to stay in place because at the very bottom, they're the safest systems to build. But then we have to build other systems on top of them. And that's a lot of what I think about. I think Second Life's governance was a kind of is an ongoing experiment, and that kind of enablement. All these discussions of direct versus representative democracy, different systems, quadratic voting, all these things that everybody's talking about are things that are going to happen next on top of these lower level systems. But yeah, we're in a bit of a wild waiting period, while we either use systems that are much too centrally governed, or comically violable. The flip side, of course, of what Adam is saying, the touche I would take is there's you losing your wallet keys and losing your money, and then there's Facebook giving out your home address to like 12 or 15 or 50 people by now that have broken into their systems. Both of those are equally horrible, right? You losing access to your bank money, and then the other one, which is you being doxxed and having all your personal information given to the world. Those systems are those outcomes are equally untenable. So we have to build something based on the low-level system, which has the problem that Adam said, which is if you lose your keys, you're really screwed. So we have to come up with some sort of place where you store your keys or whatever. And that sort of thing is what we're still all trying to build.
Yeah. But even in that system, the low-level systems work against you. I mean, if you store your keys somewhere securely, but someone still logs in and transfers them to another location, then you're still kind of screwed. I mean, what happens if your assets get transferred to the digital equivalent of Switzerland, and it disappears into a Swiss bank that's unregulated? How do you get things back? And obviously, there's ways you could build larger rules that sort of build on this, but then at that point you're wondering why you aren't just building a series of centralized systems that can talk to each other. It seems architecturally a lot simpler. And
we should go, I think, to some audience questions. Philip, you have some time to go a bit over. Just have some great questions.
I have a little bit of extra time. Yep.
Okay. Real quick, Dr. Colleen Cray asks about, she says, I work with PTSD problems in Second Life and was wondering if Breakroom would be supportive of mental health research, education, and support. We could expand that from not only Breakroom, but just virtual worlds in general about helping people with PTSD. Adam?
Okay, so for me, well, look, I think that this is actually one of those areas that we've seen success in the past. There've been a lot of people who've come into various iterations of our enterprise product, looking at mental health care, and it is this is something actually Rowan can speak to a bit. I'm stealing quite liberally from his phrase book, but there's this sort of bandwidth of communication, and if we look at things at the lowest level, like a phone call is pretty low level. There is things lower than a phone call, but audio only is a relatively low level of bandwidth. Then you've got things like spatial audio that run over the top of that. Then you've got video, and you've got sort of a full spectrum all the way up to in-person interaction. One of the great things about virtual worlds is that it lets you move yourself to that higher bandwidth of interaction with each other without compromising too much personal identity. One of the great things about virtual worlds is the ability to be somewhat anonymous. I mean, you're not revealing your real face. Yes, you might be revealing audio, and that can be considered somewhat personal, but that lets people relax a little bit more. We've seen success cases in the past with people treating mental health issues in virtual worlds by using the fact that people are more comfortable talking to an avatar than they are to another person. It's easier to break down those barriers. On the flip side of that, we actually had a research project in here for a while that was doing work on training primary care operators in dealing with these environments. And one of the great experiences that I saw was that they were looking at PTSD specifically, and they had the sort of people being trained. They were going through a normal classroom. It was a classroom setting that was built out, but then mid-class, it actually flips, and all the avatars get dumped in a war zone. And it's that kind of surprise shock that you can sort of begin to empathize a little bit more with the patients, and it was really interesting as a training outcome. So I think that there is absolutely potential in virtual worlds to do this and do this in a way that literally no other environment platform can do.
That's really cool. And I wanted to pull it back a little bit more from another audience question from Dizzy Banjo, actually. And he says, considering the impact of the social media giants on democracy and social cohesion, how can we stop them dominating social virtual worlds?
That's for both Philip, do you want to take that one? I think that's close to your heart, particularly.
We definitely have Facebook's social VR world coming online at some point in a big way.
Well, I think I don't know if we've lost Philip, but I think
go for it. No, Philip's here. I think he's considering.
No, go ahead. I'm just
go for it, Rowan.
Yeah, Rowan can jump into
You take it. Yeah.
Well, I think one really interesting observation I would make, I was actually thinking about this in the context of the last question as well, is that, and this is one of Jaron Lanier's point, actually we're all stealing everybody else's points, but he articulates this point really well, that the existing established social media platforms, they're in a way they're the exact opposite of what a virtual world is, because they are chopping everything up into little bits and sort of commoditizing it all and decontextualizing it all. And that reduces trust between people because everything is out of context. And virtual worlds are all about context. They're all about people standing around each other in context. The speakers are facing the audience here, and we're in an environment that we want to have a particular emotive response in the audience that we bring here around, cozily standing around a fire. So it's not. So there's something inherent in virtual world technology that challenges the problems that established social media companies have created for themselves and for the societies where they operate. But of course, it's not a given that as virtual worlds move from still relatively niche to being really truly mass market, that those sort of structural virtues of building trust, having a framework for building trust between people rather than eroding it, that those will be sustained, and that things like an advertising model rather than a content sales model or a subscription model will be sustained. So I think in the end, we've got a technology, or we're working in a technology space that hopefully in its structure does the opposite of some of the damaging things that you see coming out of established social media. But in the end, it comes down to the virtual world operators to have the strength and courage to preside over a culture as well as the technology. And really, for me, that's central to what the job of managing the virtual world is. It's about either directly, as in Second Life, taking responsibility for culture and governance, or building tools that allow other communities to shape and configure cultures where trust and bonds of trust can exist.
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to that I agree with in particular. The first is the idea of cohesion. I mean, we opened this talk with a discussion of what a metaverse is, and one of them is it's a shared reality. It's a shared environment that we all see, and one of the big problems we've got with the social media companies is that they chop up and give everyone their own personal reality. What you see on your timeline is not the same as what anyone else will see. It's tuned to you. And the second aspect I think that is important to touch on is the role of advertising. I mean, advertising, I think, is an incredibly corrosive force for democracy, for mental health, for so many aspects. Advertising just seeps into our lives and systematically destroys societies, and that's a big claim for something that has been around for so long. But the reality is, advertising drives a need for engagement, and engagement needs a drive for base human emotions to keep people attached to an environment, and as a result, you end up with these timelines that appear on social media networks that they're all optimized to keep you angry and doom scrolling. That's what they're there for. That the algorithms are tuned for this, not intentionally, but as a byproduct of the quest for ever higher engagement numbers. They show you things that outrage you, that just keep you engaged. They mess with your emotions. And I don't think, at least not at the moment, and look, I will inevitably be proven wrong on this one, but at least not at the moment, no one's come up with a virtual world that does the same sort of emotional manipulation that social media networks can do. And I'm very glad that that's the case, because I think that's also potentially horrible.
Yeah. And go ahead, Philip.
I was just going to say, I think that top-down moderation will ultimately be unsuccessful. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of evidence of that. That the problem is that as you enable the creativity of the participants for any of these systems like Facebook or Instagram or whatever you want to look at, TikTok, as you increase the creative range of the participants, you increase the cost of top-down moderation, perhaps geometrically. Perhaps it's like a pace with creative range. That's kind of the simple observation I would say. So that's not sustainable. So I think the simple way to look at it is, if you make a virtual world like interestingly open and creative, such as this is, you run away fairly quickly from, even if it made sense, the economic cost of moderating it top down skyrockets. It probably goes up as a larger factor than the creative complexity. So basically these systems are unmoderable. Facebook itself already has people committing suicide because they have had to have the very undesirable job of being one of these central moderators. So there's the cost, there's the human impact of central moderation, and that's only for posting pictures and text on a wall. As you move into virtual worlds, the idea of moderating an interaction between multiple people as avatars, there's no way you can do that centrally, and of course you wouldn't want to anyway. But even if just tactically looking at it that way, if you look at something like Facebook's Horizons or Rec Room or VR Chat, if you're going to go with central moderation there, it's absolutely just going to fail. That the moderation cost per person is going to be grotesquely more than the person is willing to pay or contribute to the world.
Philip, does that mean, do you think that doesn't that mean that the solution has to be that the investor class investing in virtual worlds have to accept that the growth of a virtual world to be sustainable can only be at the rate at which it can build that social fabric of communities that can be trusted to moderate themselves? Is it effectively that's the problem is that investors will always push for faster growth that doesn't allow that kind of social fabric to be built?
I think that was very eloquently put, Rohan. I hope people listen to that. I think what you said there was spot on. That one of the challenges is, if you look at something like Clubhouse, for example, the enthusiasm of the investors, and I would say this was true in the earliest days of Second Life, although we didn't really listen. Second Life's kind of its own creature. You know, it grew as quickly as it could, but and no faster. But I think that, yeah, if you're trying to get something to grow a factor of 10 and then another factor of 10, starting from 1 million people already, you can't do that with some sort of internally regulated system of moderation, as you said, Rohan. So very well put. I agree. I think that you just have to. I think that there are mechanisms that we can build, that, you know, voting or whatever, you know, pick a thing, right? You know, build a bunch of scaffolding around that, you know, voting and cryptocurrency or whatever. I think there are mechanisms that we can build that allow communities to form that police each other in the right way. But I think you are absolutely, it is a very elegant point that no matter what those mechanisms are, the growth rate allowed of those systems will be lower than what the sexy new TikTok idea, what its investors will want it to grow. So I think that's an interesting problem. It doesn't really matter, though, because in the long term, you're going to set some cumulative compounding growth rate, which is still going to get you to where you need to go, is what I would say. So I think you can build a self-moderating system the right way, and it's then going to inexorably grow at, you know, 25% a year or something, right? But it's eventually going to get to everybody. But to your point, it is going to frustrate your investors along the way who want to build the next thing that is yet bigger than Clubhouse in a shorter amount of time. You know,
the funny thing is, I can actually name an example of something that has successfully done this, and that's Stack Overflow. All the programmers here will know what Stack Overflow is. It's a forum that every programmer on the planet uses, and they've done actually a pretty good job, I will say. I know there's issues with it, but they've done a pretty good job of building a self-organizing community, and a lot of that's to the incentives on the site, the way they've incentivized users with points and badges and things for not being completely obstructive and problematic, and there are people like that, but it can be done, although that will be harder today. Definitely, I think investor patience for slower growth is less than any time I've known.
As it relates to incentives, I also worry about, and this is true with games and things like Clubhouse. You know, Clubhouse, just, I'm not picking on it. It's a very fine current example of this. If you build a social environment in which the incentive structure is no holds barred, you know, except for the most egregious violations of human rights, it's a no holds barred brawl where let's find out who will be the next big influencer. You know, it's a kind of a game of Survivor, where the ones that remain are the most entertaining influencers, right? I think that kind of an incentive structure will inevitably create a lot of pain and suffering. You know, that it's an example of, if the motivation for being in a virtual world is that you want to climb over the bodies of the vanquished to be the most famous person in the world, I mean, that's going to result, understandably, in a feeling in there that is pretty, you know, quote, toxic, right? Like you're going to create a very bad environment if your incentive structure is simply rewarding, you know, say financial success or fame or likes or whatever, right? So I think what you want to do is create communities that are more holistic in their sense. You know, I've said this before, I'll say it here. What about a virtual world whose strict purpose was, and you had to pay to be there, was that your sole purpose, and you would be kicked off the island if you didn't meet this purpose, was to be of service to others, to essentially be a gift in your time to other people there. Now, I'm not sure that that's something that everybody would want to do or that would grow to be very big, but it's kind of the antipode of what we have with something like, you know, Twitter. You know, it's like the very opposite of that would be to say, no one will let you post here unless it is patently obvious that what you're doing is being of assistance to other people at no benefit to yourself. I would only say, as an art project, it would be interesting to see such a world and to kind of set those as the going in conditions and see what happened.
It was kind of done, actually, wasn't that ancient Egypt one? Was it A Tale in the Desert that was tried many years ago? I remember reading that in Terra Nova.
Right, and I've got to wrap up here, and I've got to wrap up here. So like one minute for me, and then I got.
Yeah, that's a great place to end it. I think, from what Philip said, basically, what I glean from that is the project now is to create a mass market metaverse which inspires imagination and creativity before social media kills us all.
Well put, James. Well
Yes,
No
put.
pressure.
yeah.
But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I think we're going to turn on the group chat, and thank you, Philip, so much for
Yep.
coming into Breakroom.
This is
And
great.
thank you, Rowan and Adam, for hosting it. Then yeah, please hang around and network, because we have a fire that's going to keep burning, and feel free to hang out and meet new folks or reconnect with old ones. But thanks everyone for
Yeah.
coming.
Great to
Thank
see
you all.
everybody.
There's some fantastic
much
names
fun.
here as well. So many people I haven't spoken to in years. It's really nice to
Bye,
nice
everyone.
to see you all.
Wonderful.
See
Thank
you.
you.
All right, thanks,
Bye.
Philip. Bye.